Here we've got a PRS 2-channel 20, and while I will say that it is much better built than the 2-channel 50, which has very flimsy boards that are real thin single-sided PCB boards designed to be used as eyelet boards. Very deceptive in that if you actually solder to them more than twice, the pads want to lift up because the amount of copper is so thin. And those are also plagued by diodes not rated for the current through them. This is much better, but it's still kind of a dog stinner. You know, here's a capacitor that was glued in place and then was removed. I don't know if this is factory or whether this was someone modding the amp. There's a tacked on cathode bypass cap here that doesn't look factory. There's some fugly things done here in places like that. Resistors just up in the air off the board that's not very well supported. There's a cap here from this bias pot to ground that might have been a replacement for this cap here. Anyway, it doesn't inspire confidence. But nothing is visibly burned. The amp came in, no power, no sound, and the mains fuse was blown. Has a pair of 6V6s. I'm about to power it up with my current limiter with the new fuse in place and see if there's a reason that fuse blew, or whether sometimes fuses just go out, but a lot of the times there's a condition in the amp causing that. So let's power it on into standby. Total illumination of the light bulb in my current limiter. So let's see what's causing that. Let me first take out the 6V6s. Just in case it's a bad tube. It shouldn't be anything in the heater supply, given that the heater supply is fused in this amp, but the screen supply is not. But this is an amp with standby, and that power draw was in standby. Let's see if there's any difference now. Nope, I didn't think there would be given the standby implementation. So, I've got all these wires all bundled together, and I got to figure out which pair of secondaries has got the short condition. So, it's probably not the heaters, given that those are fused, but just in case someone replaced those heater wires with the incorrect value those heater fuses with incorrect value, let me lift these two fuses out and verify their values. Connected. That means the other secondaries are okay, and the problem is probably in the filter caps or diode, the first reservoir stage, which is problematic for the owner, given that this entire board would have to come out to change out these two caps. Okay, after a little bit of prodding and looking around, these two are center taps going to a ground connection over here. Over here, these two orange-red wires right here, that's the HT secondary, and that's a prime suspect in the problems that this amp is having with the current draw. There's a blue and yellow wire. Here's the blue one and the yellow one's over here. I suspect that's a bias tap and the bias tap ground. I'm hoping that's not it, because that yellow is really difficult to get to without undoing all this. These orange wires here, I think, are a low voltage secondary, probably done to derive LED and relay switching from. That could be a problem. It's less likely than the HT. And then down here at the other end, we have down there, the heaters, but those are fused, and I've left them disconnected. So what I'm going to do temporarily first is I'm going to disconnect this pair of HT secondaries and then see if we still have the overcurrent condition. If it goes away with these disconnected, that means the other secondaries are okay, and the problem is probably in the filter caps or diode, the first reservoir stage. which is problematic for the owner, given that this entire board would have to come out to change out these two caps. Unlike some amps, this doesn't have flanges on the sides, so the whole thing would lift out, but it'd be a matter of disconnecting everything on the front panel and many things on the back panel. And all this loom here, all this wiring, because it's got the output transformer and power transformer connections going to it, would all have to be disconnected, at least have all these things unbundled, and then many of them desoldered. So we shall see. This is why a repair on a relatively inexpensive amplifier can be higher than a similar repair on a much more expensive amplifier. All right, I've got this HT secondary up in the air, power the amp into standby, still have the excessive current. So let's verify that that actually is the HT secondary as I suspect. I take a measurement across it, even with that overcurrent condition. About 30 volts AC there is what I'm measuring. Let's disconnect this pair and see what's up. Okay, with this pair, secondary pair disconnected, still drawing way too much current. So the blue and the yellow are really the only other choices. Those in the center taps. I hope we don't have a short in the primary. It's got a thermistor or NTC in this amp. Those sometimes can go bad. So let me take a look at what's happening on the primary side of things real quick. I'm not sure how much of that I can show, but be right back. Well, I'm afraid I have some very bad news for the owner of this PRS. This is the fuse that it came in with, which is the correct 1.5 amp fuse. So the owner didn't do anything wrong. It's not like he had a 10 amp or 20 amp fuse in here. He had the correct fuse. It blew, but it's practically a dead short across the primary of the power transformer. It measures 4 ohms, which is both why it had the insane current draw with all the secondaries connected, and each secondary was measuring almost nothing. Like this pair that I showed had like 24, 30 volts AC on it. Should have been about 400 volts AC, 350 to 400 volts AC. If I had not had the current limiter on, all that would have happened I would have flipped it out of standby, we would have heard a little zit, and the fuse would have blown. So a friend of mine is a PRS dealer who has really good relationships with Paul and the gang up in Maryland. So I will find out who to talk to on Monday and see about a replacement power transformer for this model. Let me look at the other side real quick. If the stars align, these screws are going into threaded inserts in the chassis and not to nuts on the other side. If these are going into nuts on the other side, then I do have to remove that board to access them. Let's loosen one and take a peek and see. Because I see some bare holes here, like maybe for a different transformer. If I were designing this mass market, I would do it with threaded inserts. That's not wanting to turn at all. That tells me there's probably a nut on the other side. Which makes the replacement of the power transformer, much more expensive, because I would have to pull the entire board out of the amp, which means basically taking the entire amplifier apart to access the mounting bolts for the transformer, which are on this side, underneath all this. So here's one. Yeah, I'd have to remove this entire board to get to the 4 bolts underneath here holding the power transformer in place. And to pull the board, like I said, everything out of the entire amp has to come out, and many things have to be disconnected and put back together. This was never designed to be serviceable, or to be serviced, really. That I find it offensive when app companies just say, oh, well, it only has to work as long as the warranty lasts. But here we are. A perfectly fine Chinese amp with a welded, lusted after logo on the front, and cheap iron, and the cheap iron fails, and 3-4 hours labor, plus whatever the cost of the new transformer to put it back. Let me go have more coffee.